This video is brought to you by my sponsors on Patreon. Join my Patreon and you get to suggest videos, and you also get discounts on apparel, gaming books and other things that I do. So give me money. Hello lovelies. One of my patrons has asked me to do a video about voting, not about who to vote for or the different political parties or the political philosophies or anything like that, but the whole idea of voting at all, in the first place. Should you have to vote? Is it meaningful? Should you be allowed to not vote? These kind of things. It's interesting to examine these issues because democracy is founded on the idea of a vote. In many countries, however, you don't really get a meaningful vote because one party is particularly dominant or the voting system discounts certain amounts of votes, whatever. So very much the answer is going to be an unsatisfying "it depends." But here's the thing.
You want that to go again, sweetie?
Up until the last few elections, up until the last couple of referenda, you would have found me to be a rather enthusiastic vote shamer for people who didn't vote. People did die for the right to vote. People did die for the right for us, the Vox Populi, to have their say in politics, and I agitated pretty hard for reforms to Britain's voting system so that votes meant more. It was the failure of that referendum that began to sour me on the political process as a whole, and it was what felt like betrayal of the people who voted for them, of the Liberal Democrats, that pushed it even further, and then my faith in democracy has been even further shaken by what has happened with Brexit. So now I sympathise more with people who say they don't vote. I spoiled my ballot for the first time ever, the election before last, I think. So I've gone from being a pretty hardline pro-vote person to someone who's a little more nuanced on the whole thing. Britain is not the world, however, and your system, wherever you might be, might vary. You might have a proportional representation system, which is the one that most closely represents the will of the people in their representatives. You might have a first-past-the-post system like Britain, which means that most votes are essentially discarded and don't mean anything, and they only apply to your local area and your local representative. You might have a single transferable vote system where you vote for someone, and if they don't get in, but it's not an overwhelming victory, votes pass down to the second preference and are recounted again, and so on until someone wins. Yeah, that's got its strengths and weaknesses. Each of these systems has their strengths and weaknesses, but the whole idea of democracy as a whole is predicated upon the idea that it's representative, that the populace is informed and able to make a decision on the issues that are presented towards them, or are willing to delegate that authority to a more informed, technocratic, skillful elite in a representative democracy. Those are the main things, so that it represents you and you know what you're talking about. And I guess that the politicians also need to be responsive to what people say. That's a bit of a balance. Sometimes you want an expert to overrule your gut feeling because they're an expert, because they know what they're talking about better than you do. The problem is that as our democracies have aged and settled in, the kinds of people we elect has changed to those of the professional politician. So no matter who you vote for, it doesn't matter. A politician always wins. Whether your system's representative is going to vary by locality and system, how corrupt things are, how developed your political class is, how corrupt things are. That's the problem there. I can't make a universal sweeping statement on that. Something that I do think is universal, however, is the problem of the informed voter. People have poured scorn on this concept of the low information voter, but it is a thing, And it is a problem, a very real problem. Consider this. Let's say, for sake of argument, that you have a brain tumour. This is a delicate apparatus, lots of, well, not moving parts, but you get the idea. Who do you go to in order to have this operated on? Do you pick an expert who understands the ins and outs of the brain, of the cardiovascular system, of the nervous system? Do you bring in an anaesthetologist to put you under while it's done? Or do you crowdsource it to whoever's the cheapest or the most popular? Hi, Dr. Nick. How do you go about it? Who's best placed to do something about your brain tumour? Who do you elect, in essence, to do it? An expert, someone who's really good at what they do. Who are we electing into government? Professional politicians. What are they good at? Getting elected, retaining power, skullduggery, manipulation, these kind of things. They're not necessarily good at economics or education or health or defence or any of the other subjects that we put into their hands. Yeah, that's a problem, but it's also a problem in the populace, because many people are uninformed, misinformed, or willfully disinformed about how things work. Can the average person then be trusted to make decisions on things that are so important, like macroeconomics, like geopolitics, like defense, like economics, like industrial investment or welfare provision or any of the, or banking regulation? I mean, that's a prime example. We have a massive problem with regulating and accusing people who perform fraud in financial institutions because it's just so opaque and hard to understand that getting a jury of 12 people who can understand and follow what's going on in the trial to render a verdict is virtually impossible. And that's just trials, not government. So, yeah, there's an issue with voting in that this is more specific in referenda, which deal with specific questions and not the delegation of power on a more general basis. But there's a lot of people that just don't know, for one reason or another, what they're voting on, why or how. They're not considering at the largest scale of what's happening. The best example I have of this is Brexit, which was sold as being this, it's easy, it'll be beneficial. We're coming to the end game of that now, with Theresa May having bashed out some sort of deal with the EU that she now has to get past her cabinet, her party and parliament, and to a lesser extent the people. And that looks unlikely, but a lot of people were voting on that based on parochial, local reasons like fisheries or whatever else, something that affects the local community and not looking at the wider picture, or were woefully misinformed and disinformed by decades of propaganda from the Rupert Murdoch media. So were they in a good position to make an informed decision on whether they wanted to be in the EU or not? And for a lot of people, the answer is simply no. A lot of the politicians didn't understand how it was going to work out. We've had admissions from the Northern Ireland Secretary that they didn't understand the situation in Northern Ireland, and for the current Brexit negotiator, that he didn't understand how important the Calais ferry terminal was to British industry. So if the politicians don't know what they're doing, how can Joe Blow down the street with an IQ of sub 100 be trusted to make decisions on these complex issues? Which isn't to say that everybody that voted for Brexit is stupid or doesn't have what they consider to be a good reason or whatever. It's just, that's an example I can give that acknowledges this problem, that quite often we, the voters, are just not informed or capable enough, or have been misled when it comes to issues. So when you're considering whether you should vote, or indeed whether anyone should vote, you need to consider whether your system's representative, whether your vote counts for anything under your local system, whether you're informed enough about whatever the issues of the day are to make a decision, what kind of society you want to see. Now, quite a lot of this might make you feel like, I don't want to vote. I mean, the system is too corrupt, or it's too unrepresentative, or I'm not informed enough on the issues. You can inform yourself, you can educate yourself on the issues, you can seek out multiple news sources and the raw source of information these days, thanks to the internet, to inform yourself on things. I mean, would you trust someone who only ever reads the Daily Mail with the vote, or someone who only ever reads the Guardian with the vote, or would you regard that person as being woefully uninformed and misinformed about the state of the world and how things work? So yeah, a lot of responsibility is on us as voters to educate ourselves, shitlords, so that we know what's going on and we can make informed decisions. So since we can do that, that's not really a reason not to vote. Unrepresentative systems, well, there's no reason you can't vote anyway, albeit perhaps for the lesser evil or whatever, just to minimize damage while you also work for reform. And a lot of people are expressing themselves politically not through alignment to a party these days, because they find that there's plenty to disagree with whatever party there happens to be. They don't feel that vibe or that need to join a political party to forward their political agenda, because there are plenty of single issue groups and people out there, and then that way you can pick and choose from all these single issue pressure groups and so on, and you can work for them, you can be an activist, you can provide money to them, and in many ways you're more likely to get traction by doing that than you are by voting. But again, there's no reason why you can't do both. So for all the problems that there might be around voting, there's still plenty of good reason to vote. So should you? I mean, people have fought and died for our right to participate in democracy and to express our vote however we want. But does that mean we have to? You know, freedom can often be refusing to do something as much as it can be being given the right to do something. Just because Jordan Peterson's on my mind at the moment, he's been accused of being anti-trans and so on, and this has created a fuss with him and James Raggi of Lamentations of the Flame Princess. So it's intersected with the role-playing community in a way that's made it forefront of my mind. What he was complaining about with Bill C-16, and he's slowly being proven right as it's applied, he was demanding the right not to have to conform to other people's linguistic rules and so on. It's not exactly anti-trans, it's a more nuanced position than that, but the right to abstain, the right to object, the right to stand apart from things. Conscientious objection in war is a freedom, but also the right to serve, as women are now getting in the military. That can also be seen as a freedom, or an imposition, both ways if you look at the draft. So there's no easy one way or the other thing on this, and it can be a freedom not to participate. Why should you have to participate in a system that you consider to be morally bankrupt or whatever? There are advantages to making everybody vote under threat of penalty. I believe Australia does this, a few other countries require you to vote. That means there's no quibbling about a mandate or anything, and people can still spoil their ballots. It would be nice if there was a none of the above option on a lot of ballots and so on. But at the moment, if you don't vote, nobody really knows what you're saying. Are you just abstaining? Are you complaining about the process? Do you think the candidates are bad? And this is why turnouts have been low and low and lower, unless there's someone polarizing like Donald Trump out there, or a big issue like Brexit. And even Brexit only got 2/3 of eligible voters out there to vote. So proper mandates, a proper read of the public mood is more frequent and more likely under systems where everyone votes, where everyone has to vote even. But then that's an imposition, and it's taking away from people's freedom. So I've gone all around the issues and everything, and what do I come at the end? Like I say, I used to be very rabidly, you should vote no matter what, at least the lesser evil is the lesser evil, and there's no reason you can't continue to campaign for reform. But that's my journey, under my system, around our issues here in the UK. There isn't an easy answer. I think you have to decide for yourself. I think despite everything I've been through, despite my shifted opinion, I would say that voting is better than not voting. You can still always spoil your ballot, or write in a candidate in some places and so on. So I would still participate. But increasingly, if you want real change, you need to join in with single issue agitation. Zang.
Time to light it up, raise it to the sky and watch it burn, 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 burn.
This is horrible what happened today. See, I don't like I have, okay, like a lot of you, I hate a lot, you know? But I hate with style and creativity.